Ragnar Lothbrok is a historical figure who has resurged into mainstream popularity thanks to the success of the hit historical TV show Vikings, in which the life and ultimately the death of Ragnar fascinated and engrossed millions of viewers from all across the world. And although the Vikings TV show depicts Ragnar's demise as being orchestrated by King Aela, who has him tortured and then thrown into a pit of snakes, one cannot help but wonder how truly accurate is this depiction of Ragnar's final moments. That is the question that will be further considered and elaborated upon in this video. If we accept the premise that Ragnar was a real historical figure and not an amalgamation of several Viking figures using the name of Ragnar, then what do contemporary and medieval sources tell us about this legendary figure's death? And which of these discourses hold the most weight based upon the limited evidence we have available? All of this and more will be considered in this video. So the most popular and well-known theory about the death of Ragnar Lothbrok is the one depicted in the Vikings TV series, in which King Aela throws Ragnar into a pit of venomous snakes where he is bitten and stung to death by the reptiles. So although it is true Vikings was a historical show which took many liberties with history and actual events, it seems that at least the death of Ragnar may not have been purely fictional. This presentation of Ragnar's death is substantiated by several medieval sources, primarily from the Norse and Danish perspective. The various sources that mention death by King Aela and the snake pit include, but are not limited to, Tales of Ragnar's Sons, Gesta Danarum, and the Saga of Ragnar Lothbrok. Each of these three sources highlight that Ragnar was defeated or captured by King Aela supposedly after a battle, and he has Ragnar tortured and then killed by snakes. These Norse sources are very mythos heavy and are not the most reliable in terms of historical accuracy, but each of these sagas highlights the fact that it was these atrocities committed against Ragnar by King Aela that resulted in the great heathen army led by several of Ragnar's sons, who spent a large amount of effort and energy in ensuring the destruction and conquest of much of England. But it is not only Norse and Danish authors who reference Ragnar's death at the behest of King Aela, as the Annals of St. Neo also states this viewpoint, but the actual method of execution is not expanded upon in his works. So, taking into the account the many and varying sources we have referencing King Aela killing Ragnar by throwing him into a snake pit, I think it would be prudent to at least accept this version of Ragnar's death as a plausible discourse which could have many elements of truth entwined within the mythos of his life. But there are also other less grandiose and less known theories behind the death of Ragnar Lothbrok which should also be considered. There is also a lesser discussed discourse which also has some contemporary backing, which argues that Ragnar may have actually passed away somewhere in Ireland or on the Irish Sea, where he was raiding any settlements he could find that were connected along its coast. This is a theory that is first introduced in the Gesta Danorum, a historical text written by Danish historian Saxo Grammaticus in the 12th century. And this historical document is recognized as the first attempt to write a fully comprehensive and concise history of Denmark. In this work, Saxo Grammaticus states that Ragnar was raiding the shores of Ireland from 851 AD onwards, and that he perished somewhere between the years 852 and 856, while sailing across the Irish Sea. But there is no definitive cause of death mentioned in this version, just that he was very far from Aela and any snake pits at the end of his life. However, it is important to note that there are no other contemporary sources which further corroborate or strengthen this theory, and although it is true that some of Ragnar's sons did make their way to Ireland, I am just not fully convinced that Ragnar ever reached this destination, making the death in Ireland theory a plausible but unlikely proposition in my opinion. The final predominant theory of the death of Ragnar Lothbrok that we will be discussing is that he died in France after being captured by Charles the Bald and executed after a failed raid on a Frankish village. This theory is proposed in the Annals of St. Britain, which is a Frankish source, and it highlights Charles the Bald executing an important Viking leader, although I feel it is necessary to emphasize the fact that this figure is never directly named in the Annals of St. Britain, and the manner of execution is never elaborated upon either. However, I feel that this theory fits well within the timeline of what we know about the sack of Paris in 845, and the involvement of a Viking leader named Ragnar within this endeavor. There's also some evidence that Charles the Bald awarded a Viking called Ragnar some land and power in Flanders in 841, but a few years later Ragnar would fall out of favour with the king and be forced to flee from France, after Charles assembled a massive army to defeat Ragnar once and for all. In this version of events, Ragnar is able to defeat a small portion of the army sent against him, after which he would sacrifice 111 prisoners as a tribute to Odin, and then eventually return back to Denmark, where he would die shortly thereafter from an unknown illness. So again, in this discourse, two alternative theories are presented that oppose the death by snake pit argument, which is the most often cited method of execution for Ragnar Lothbrok. But based on medieval Frankish sources, there is a strong enough probability of Ragnar potentially dying in France that it should at least be recognized and considered as a conceivable discourse when discussing the death of Ragnar Lothbrok. So in this video I have presented my opinion on the three most probable theories on how a historical figure named Ragnar Lothbrok may have died, with execution by snake pit being the theory that I believe to have the most substance and the strongest amount of historical backing. But let me know if there are any theories on the death of Ragnar Lothbrok that I may have missed, and which of the theories presented in this video you feel is the most plausible way that Ragnar may have died. And lastly, remember, if you want to explore the death of history's greatest figures, then subscribe to my channel Historical Exit, and thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.